Rain hit the apartment windows hard enough to sound like fingers tapping from outside. Elena stood in the dark kitchen counting the last bills in her wallet while the microwave turned slowly behind her. Across the tiny apartment, her son was asleep on the couch under a blanket that smelled faintly like laundry soap and old radiator heat. The building was quiet in the way old buildings became quiet after midnight. Pipes settling, elevator cables humming somewhere far below, somebody coughing through thin walls. Ordinary sounds, the kind people stopped noticing after a while. Then she heard footsteps stop outside her door. Not passing by. Waiting. Elena froze without meaning to. One hand still pressed against the folded cash. She looked toward the hallway instinctively, even though there was nothing to see except the deadbolt and the strip of weak light under the door. The footsteps didn't move again. Her stomach tightened slowly. She had spent the last 2 years teaching herself not to panic over every noise after Daniel died. Single mothers in cheap apartment buildings did not have the luxury of fear. Fear still had to wake up at 6 in the morning and catch the bus to work. Another sound came a few seconds later, metal brushing softly against the doorknob. Elena crossed the room immediately and grabbed the kitchen knife beside the sink before she even realized she had moved. Her breathing turned shallow. On the couch, Noah shifted slightly in his sleep and curled deeper beneath the blanket. 8 years old, too thin lately, growing faster than she could afford. The doorknob moved once, slowly, then stopped. A man's voice came from the hallway outside. Calm, low, close enough that she could hear the rainwater still dripping from his coat. You picked the wrong apartment. Silence followed. Elena's pulse hammered so loudly she almost missed the second voice farther down the hall. Move. Then came a sound she would remember for the next several months, every time she tried to sleep. A heavy impact against the wall. A sharp grunt. Another one. Fast. Controlled. No shouting. Whoever was outside wasn't fighting like drunk men in the street. It sounded efficient. Short. Violent. Noah woke up instantly. Mom, it's okay. The lie came out automatically. She moved toward him just as something heavy slammed against the door from outside. The frame shook once. Noah sat upright on the couch. Frightened, now. Elena pulled him against her chest and stared toward the entrance while the hallway fell silent again. Then 3 quiet knocks came through the wood. Not aggressive. Measured. Elena said nothing. The same calm voice spoke again. They're gone. She recognized that voice. Apartment 4C. The man across the hall, the one everybody in the building pretended not to look at. The elevator doors had opened for him 3 days ago, while Elena carried groceries upstairs with Noah. Tall man. Dark charcoal coat, still damp from rain. Sharp face. Exhausted eyes that looked older than the rest of him. 2 other men had stepped aside immediately when they saw him, lowering their voices without being told. Even the landlord suddenly became polite around him. Then yesterday morning, Noah had innocently asked her why the scary neighbor carried a gun under his jacket. Elena had laughed it off at the time. Now she couldn't even breathe properly. Another pause outside. Then the man spoke one last time. You should replace this lock tomorrow. His footsteps moved away down the hallway. Slow. Steady. No rush at all. Elena stayed frozen beside the couch until she finally heard a door open across the hall. Then close. Noah looked up at her carefully. Mom. She swallowed hard. What? The man outside. His small voice hesitated. He sounded like he already knew they were coming. Elena barely slept after that. Every sound inside the apartment building felt sharper by morning. Pipes knocking behind the walls. Someone dragging trash bags down the hallway. The old elevator groaning between floors. She kept replaying the sounds outside her door over and over while getting Noah ready for school. The heavy impact against the wall. The silence afterward. The calm voice telling her to replace the lock like he was discussing the weather. Noah sat at the tiny kitchen table, eating dry cereal because the milk had gone bad overnight. He watched her quietly while she checked the peephole for the third time in less than 10 minutes. "You think they're coming back?" he asked. Elena forced herself to look away from the door. "No. You're lying." The words weren't accusing, just tired. Too observant for 8 years old. She exhaled slowly and crouched beside him. "I just want us to be careful." Noah nodded once, like he understood more than he should. Then he looked toward the hallway. The man across the hall scared them. Elena's stomach tightened again. "Eat your breakfast." The hallway outside their apartment smelled faintly like bleach and wet concrete when they left for school. Elena kept Noah close beside her while locking the door. The new lock wouldn't be installed until Friday, because the landlord said he was short on maintenance people. Translation: short on money and effort. The building itself looked exhausted. Water stains across the ceiling, flickering lights. Mailboxes bent open near the lobby. But something felt different that morning. Quieter. As if people were listening from behind doors. The elevator dinged softly before opening. And he was already inside. The man from across the hall stood near the back corner wearing the same dark coat from the night before. Fresh rain still clung to the shoulders. Tall enough that the flickering elevator light cut shadows beneath his eyes. He looked calm, awake, completely unaffected by whatever had happened outside her apartment. Noah immediately straightened beside her. Elena almost turned around to take the stairs. The man pressed the hold button before the doors could close. Waiting, not speaking, Elena stepped inside carefully with Noah close against her side. The elevator suddenly felt too small, too warm. She could smell cold air and cigarette smoke still lingering faintly on his coat. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Noah quietly said, "Mom?" "That's him." Elena closed her eyes briefly. "I know." The man looked down at Noah for the first time. His expression didn't soften exactly. It became quieter somehow. "You sleep okay?" he asked. Noah nodded. "You?" The question surprised Elena enough that she looked at her son sharply. The man's mouth moved slightly, like he almost smiled. "Almost. I've had worse nights." The elevator doors opened into the lobby. Elena stepped out immediately. But Noah slowed halfway toward the entrance. Children noted, strange thing adults tried to ignore. His eyes drifted toward the man's right hand. A fresh bruise stretched across the knuckles. Dark red. The man noticed Noah looking. "So?" he said calmly. "Did your mother buy a new lock yet?" Elena answered before Noah could. "Why were those men outside my apartment?" The lobby became still. Even the old landlord behind the desk stopped pretending to read paperwork. The man looked at her directly for the first time since moving into the building. His eyes were darker up close. Not cold, just heavily tired. Like somebody who hadn't fully rested in years. "I told them to leave," he said. "That doesn't answer my question." "No." His voice stayed level. "It doesn't." Then he stepped past them toward the exit. Outside, rainwater rolled slowly down the apartment windows facing the street. A black sedan waited at the curb with the engine running. Before opening the door, the man glanced back once toward Elena. "You should walk your son to school a different way today." Then he got inside the car and disappeared into traffic. Elena stood frozen near the lobby entrance long after the sedan vanished. The landlord quietly cleared his throat behind her. "Miss Elena," she turned. The older man lowered his voice immediately. "You should listen to him." "Why?" The landlord hesitated. "Because fear was easier when unnamed." Finally he said, "In this neighborhood, people usually disappear after men like that start asking questions." Elena looked toward the rain-covered street again, then down at Noah's small hand, wrapped tightly around hers. And for the first time since moving into the building, she realized something worse than living near dangerous people. Dangerous people already knew where she lived. For the next several days, Elena changed routines without admitting to herself that she was afraid. She stopped taking the alley behind the grocery store after work. She checked parked cars before leaving Noah's school. Every night, she shoved a chair beneath the apartment doorknob before sleeping. It made no real difference. But exhaustion sometimes accepted small lies if they helped you close your eyes. The man across the hall kept appearing anyway, never close enough to feel intentional. One morning, his black sedan rolled slowly past the bus stop, while Elena waited with Noah in freezing wind. The next evening, she spotted him standing outside the corner pharmacy, speaking quietly into a phone while two men nearby watched the street instead of him. Around midnight, she looked through the peephole after hearing footsteps and saw him sitting alone at the far end of the hallway stairs, smoking in silence with a gun resting beside him on the concrete step. Always watching something, never explaining. By Friday, the radiator inside Elena's apartment finally died completely. The cold settled into the walls before sunset. Noah sat wrapped in two hoodies trying to finish homework beside a small lamp while Elena crouched near the radiator, hitting the pipe lightly with a wrench she barely knew how to use. Nothing happened. She hit it again harder. Still dead. "Mom," Noah said quietly. "I can see my breath." "I know." The landlord stopped answering calls an hour earlier. Outside, sleet rattled softly against the windows. Elena stared at the useless radiator while trying to calculate whether she could afford a space heater before next paycheck. The answer arrived immediately. No. A knock sounded against the apartment door. Short, controlled. Her entire body tightened. Noah looked toward the entrance first. The knock came again. Elena grabbed the knife from the counter before opening the door halfway. The man across the hall stood there holding a metal toolbox in one hand. "I heard the pipe stop. That's not really your problem." "No." He agreed calmly. "Open the door anyway." She should have refused. Every rational thought she had spent the week building told her refusing would be safer. But Noah's hands were pale from cold behind her. And the apartment already felt like winter. Elena stepped aside carefully. The man entered without looking around the apartment. That unsettled her more than curiosity would have. He walked directly toward the radiator, set the toolbox down, and crouched beside the pipe like he had done this before somewhere else. His movements were efficient, quiet. Heavy hands used to harder work than apartment repairs. Noah watched him openly from the kitchen table. "You know how to fix those?" he asked. "A little." You fix everything. The man loosened part of the pipe valve before answering. No, there was something strangely honest in the way he said it. Elena stayed near the doorway to the kitchen with her arms folded tightly. You don't have maintenance people for this, I do. Then why are you here yourself? He glanced up briefly. Because your son's cold now. The answer landed harder than she expected. Metal clanged softly against metal while he worked. For several minutes, the apartment filled only with small mechanical sounds and sleet tapping the windows. Then, suddenly, the radiator coughed once. Steam hissed through the pipe. Warmth slowly returned. Noah grinned immediately. Actual excitement lighting his tired little face for the first time all week. It's working. The man tightened the last valve carefully before standing. Up close, Elena noticed faint bruising near his collar beneath the dark sweater. Old bruises, half healed. His eyes looked worse tonight too. Red around the edges from lack of sleep. Dangerous men. She thought suddenly. Still got tired. Thank you, she said quietly before she could stop herself. He nodded once and started toward the door. Then Noah spoke again. Wait. The man stopped. Noah reached into the kitchen cabinet, pulled out the last packaged hot chocolate packet they had left, and held it out awkwardly. You can have this. Elena almost apologized immediately for the embarrassment of it. One cheap packet of powdered hot chocolate offered to a man who arrived in black sedans, surrounded by armed escorts. But the man simply looked at Noah for a moment. Then he took it carefully from his hand like it actually mattered. You should keep it. We have coffee too. Noah said seriously. Mom drinks coffee when she's worried. A quiet silence settled over the apartment. Elena felt heat rise into her face. Noah. But the man's expression changed slightly again. That same restrained almost smile from the elevator days earlier. He slipped the hot chocolate packet into his coat pocket. Get some sleep tonight, kid. Then he left. The apartment became strangely quiet after the door closed behind him. Warmer now. Safer somehow. Which frightened Elena more than the cold had. Noah returned to the table and continued coloring his homework sheet like nothing unusual had happened. After a minute, he looked up at her. He doesn't feel scary when he talks to me. Elena stared toward the closed door across the hallway. Neither did the men who tried to break into her apartment. She thought, until it was too late. The hallway outside apartment 4B slowly changed after that night. Elena noticed it in small ways first. The broken light near the stairwell suddenly worked again after flickering for almost a year. Men she had never seen before occasionally stood near the entrance downstairs, pretending to smoke while quietly watching the street. The landlord started fixing things faster on their floor than anywhere else in the building. Even the teenagers who usually blasted music near the laundry room disappeared after dark now. Nobody explained any of it. People simply adapted around fear when they recognized it. 3 weeks passed without another incident outside her apartment door. Long enough for exhaustion to become dangerous again. Long enough for Elena to stop checking every parked car before walking Noah home from school. That was when Noah started knocking on the apartment across the hall after class. The first time it happened, Elena nearly dropped the grocery bags in her hands. Absolutely not. Noah looked confused. I was just saying hi. You don't bother people like that. He said I could. Eleanor stared at him. When yesterday, her stomach tightened immediately. You talked to him yesterday, Noah nodded carefully. Already sensing the shift in her voice, he walked me upstairs when those older boys were fighting outside. The groceries suddenly felt heavier in Elena's arms. What older boys? The ones near the basketball court. Fear entered quietly. Always quietly. Never dramatic. Just a cold tightening beneath the ribs as her mind began filling gaps she hadn't known existed. What happened? They were yelling at each other. Noah said. Then his car stopped. He's the man across the hall. Elena crouched immediately in front of her son. Did he touch you? No. Did he say anything strange? No. Then why did he walk you home? Noah hesitated. Because the boys stopped yelling when they saw him. The answer followed her for the rest of the night. Around midnight, Elena stepped into the hallway carrying a trash bag and found him sitting on the floor near the far stairwell landing again. Dark sweater. Heavy coat beside him. One arm resting across his knee while smoke curled slowly toward the ceiling vent. He looked up as she approached. You let my son knock on your door. His expression barely changed. He usually asks first. That isn't funny. No. He took another drag from the cigarette. It isn't. Elena tightened her grip on the trash bag. I don't want him getting attached to you. That landed somewhere deeper than she intended. She saw it immediately in his eyes before the expression disappeared again. He won't, he said quietly. The answer bothered her more than reassurance would have. She glanced toward the handgun, resting beside him on the concrete stair. Matte black. Clean. Ready. You expecting trouble? I expect trouble every day. There was no bravado in the statement. Just routine. Elena should have walked away then. Instead, she found herself looking at the dark circles beneath his eyes again. When do you sleep? Sometimes in the car. That's not sleeping. His mouth moved faintly. Close enough. For a moment, the building felt strangely still around them. Old pipes humming through the walls. Distant sirens somewhere downtown. The quiet exhaustion of people trying to survive winter. Then his phone vibrated. Everything about him changed instantly. Not louder. Not panicked. Sharper. He stood before answering. One hand already reaching for the gun beside him. Yeah. Silence while he listened. Elena watched his eyes harden slowly. How many? Another silence. Then he looked directly toward her apartment door across the hallway. Keep them away from this building. The call ended. Elena felt cold despite the heated hallway. What happened? He slipped the phone back into his coat. Go inside. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. He started down the stairs quickly. Elena. She froze. He had never said her name before. If anyone knocks after midnight, he said without turning back. Don't open the door unless you hear my voice first. Then he disappeared downstairs. Elena stood alone in the hallway, listening to his footsteps fade into the building below. Across from her, Noah had opened the apartment door slightly without her noticing. Small face half hidden in the crack. Mom, she turned immediately. Why are you awake? Noah looked toward the stairwell, where the man vanished moments earlier. Then he asked the question quietly enough to hurt. Is he the reason bad people keep coming here, or the reason they haven't reached us yet? The first real crack appeared 3 days later. Elena came home from her second shift, carrying leftover diner rolls wrapped in napkins for Noah's lunch. The hallway lights on the 4th floor were out again. Leaving the corridor washed in weak blue-gray evening light from the stairwell window, her apartment door was slightly open. Just half an inch. Enough. Every muscle in her body locked instantly. Noah. No answer. The grocery bag slipped from her hand onto the floor. Elena pushed the door open hard and rushed inside. expecting the worst thing a parent could imagine. Silence met her first. Then movement from the kitchen. Noah sat at the table eating soup, completely unharmed. The relief hit so hard it almost made her knees weak. "Mom," she crossed the room immediately and grabbed his face with both hands, checking him for injuries before she even realized she was frightening him. "What happened? The lock wouldn't work," Noah said carefully. "He fixed it." Elena froze. Who? Noah pointed toward the counter. A new deadbolt sat installed beside the old lock. Heavy steel. Professional work. Still warm from the drill marks. The apartment across the hall opened seconds later. He stepped out carrying a toolbox again. Elena. Her fear returned immediately. This time tangled with anger. "You entered my apartment. The landlord gave me the spare key. You had no right. You were at work. Your son was standing in the hallway because the lock jammed. I would have handled it. You weren't here." The words came calm and direct. No apology attached to them. Noah looked between them quietly, while steam rose from the soup bowl. Elena lowered her voice immediately for her son's sake. "Stop deciding things for us." The man studied her for a moment. Exhaustion lined his face more deeply tonight. Fresh bruising darkened near his jaw beneath the hallway light. "You think I enjoy this arrangement?" he asked quietly. "What arrangement?" "This." He gestured once between the apartments, the hallway, the constant watching. Before Elena could answer, movement downstairs echoed sharply through the stairwell. Fast footsteps. More than one person. The man turned instantly toward the noise. Everything about him changed again. Sharp. Focused. Dangerous. Inside. He said. Elena felt fear crawl slowly into her throat. "Who is it?" But he was already pulling the handgun from beneath his coat. Noah saw it clearly this time. The child didn't scream, didn't panic. He just looked suddenly small. The man noticed immediately. His voice softened without losing control. "Hey, kid." Noah stared at the weapon. "You stay behind your mother tonight." Then the footsteps below stopped. A long silence followed. The man moved toward the stairwell carefully while keeping his body between the sound and Elena's apartment door. Elena watched him disappear around the corner, with the gun low against his side. Seconds passed. Then a male voice echoed faintly from downstairs. "Wrong building." Another voice answered. "You sure? Yeah." Silence again. A door opened somewhere below. Closed. Then nothing. Several more seconds passed before he returned upstairs. "Elena," he said quietly. "Pack a bag." The hallway suddenly felt colder. "What, just enough for you and Noah?" Her chest tightened. "Why? Because if they start checking apartments one by one, I need you ready to move fast." Noah slowly set his spoon down at the kitchen table. Elena stared at the man across from her. "Who are they?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "People connected to your husband." The words hollowed the air from the room. "Daniel. Dead almost 2 years. Dead from what police called a robbery gone wrong near the docks after working late deliveries." Elena shook her head immediately. "My husband drove trucks. Your husband carried information for men he shouldn't have trusted." "That's not true." The man's eyes didn't move from hers. "Did the police ever find his phone after he died?" Her mouth closed. "Because no, they never had." The man continued carefully. "Did he start checking the windows at night near the end?" A cold pressure spread slowly through Elena's chest. Daniel standing silently beside the curtains at 3 in the morning. Daniel changing routes home from work. Daniel once whispering, "If anything ever happens to me, take Noah and disappear somewhere quiet." At the time, she thought debt had broken him. Stress. Exhaustion. Now those memories felt different, sharper. "You knew him," she whispered. The hallway stayed silent for a moment, except for distant rain against old windows. Then finally the man answered, "Yes." Elena felt suddenly unsteady. Not because danger existed, because somewhere deep down, part of her realized this man had not moved across the hall to watch strangers. He moved there because he already knew exactly who lived inside apartment 4B. Elena didn't sleep at all that night. Noah eventually drifted off on the couch, with a blanket tucked beneath his chin while rain pressed softly against the apartment windows. But Elena stayed awake at the kitchen table, staring at Daniel's old photograph in her hands. Truck driver. Quiet husband. Tired father who smelled like engine oil and winter air. That was the man she married. Not someone carrying information dangerous enough to get people killed. Across the hallway, faint footsteps moved once around 3 in the morning. Slow pacing. The man across from her still awake too. Watching. By sunrise, Elena's nerves felt scraped raw. She almost didn't open the diner that morning. The coffee machine hissed beside her while pale winter light crept through greasy front windows. Her manager talked about inventory shortages. A customer complained about cold toast. Ordinary life continued with cruel efficiency while Elena's entire understanding of the last 2 years quietly collapsed underneath it. Then the bell above the diner door rang, and the room fell silent. He walked in, alone, dark coat damp from snow now, instead of rain. One hand bruised again. The entire diner subtly changed around him without a word spoken. Customers looked away instinctively. 2 construction workers near the counter lowered their voices immediately. Power announced itself differently depending on who carried it. He took the corner booth furthest from the windows. The same booth Daniel used to sit in when he waited for Elena after late shifts. That realization hit hard enough to steal her breath for a second. A waitress beside her whispered nervously. "You know him," Elena answered too quickly. "No." But when she brought the coffee pot over, he looked up at her like he already expected she would. "You should have stayed home today," he said quietly. "I can't afford that." "You can't afford this either." She poured coffee harder than necessary. "Stop talking like you know my life." His eyes lifted toward the front window. A gray sedan sat parked across the street. Engine running. 2 men inside. Elena felt cold immediately. "They've been outside since 6. He said. Her pulse started climbing. "Who are they?" "People trying to figure out what Daniel left behind." "He didn't leave anything behind." "You're wrong." The certainty in his voice frightened her more than the answer itself. Elena lowered her tone sharply. "Then tell me the truth for once." He finally looked at her directly. "Your husband copied financial records from men connected to city contracts, Portugnon, and organized shipments." He realized too late the people involved included police. Elena stared at him. He was a truck driver. He drove shipments he wasn't supposed to ask questions about. The diner suddenly felt too small around her. "He never told me any of this." "He was trying to keep you out of it." "You expect me to believe Daniel was mixed up with organized crime. I expect you to understand why men are searching your apartment at night." Before Elena could answer, the bell above the diner door rang again. One of the men from the gray sedan entered, mid-30s, dark jacket, calm face, the kind of man who blended easily into crowded streets. His eyes moved once across the diner before settling directly on Elena. Then on the man in the booth. Everything became still. The customer approached slowly. "You're difficult to find these days." The man across from Elena never moved from his seat. "You found the wrong place. I'm not here for you." A lie. Everyone in the diner felt it immediately. Elena's hands tightened around the coffee pot. The stranger looked toward her briefly. "Mrs. Alvarez." Right, her stomach dropped. The man in the booth stood up slowly, and suddenly the stranger took one careful step backward. That was the first time Elena truly understood fear traveled both directions. The stranger recovered quickly. "We just want to ask a few questions about your husband." "She doesn't know anything." "That's not your decision." The room became silent enough to hear the kitchen freezer humming behind the counter. Then the man beside Elena spoke quietly. "It is now." The stranger held his stare for several long seconds before giving a small nod. "People are getting nervous," he said. "You can't guard her forever." The answer came without hesitation. "Watch me." The stranger left without another word. The diner stayed frozen until the gray sedan finally disappeared down the street. Then conversation slowly returned in frightened pieces around them. Elena looked at the man beside her differently now. Not safer. More dangerous than before. Because for the first time, she realized the men hunting her were afraid of him too. And dangerous people usually only feared one thing: someone worse. That evening, snow covered the city in the kind of silence that made distant sirens sound farther away than they really were. Elena packed a bag anyway. 3 changes of clothes for Noah. Medicine. Birth certificates. Cash from the coffee tin above the refrigerator. Every few minutes she caught herself stopping in the middle of the apartment just to listen. The building felt wrong tonight. Too still. Across the hall, his apartment door remained slightly open for the first time since he moved in. She could hear low voices inside, men speaking carefully, the occasional scrape of chairs against hardwood. Noah sat on the couch watching her pack. "Are we leaving? I don't know yet." "You only pack like this when you're scared." Elena paused. Children learned fear by studying adults who tried to hide it. Before she could answer, a knock came softly from across the hall. Not on her door, on his. Then another knock downstairs. Then another. The voices inside his apartment stopped immediately. Every light emotion from the past few weeks vanished in an instant. The hallway outside filled with footsteps. Elena crossed the apartment fast and pulled Noah behind her, just as his voice came sharply from across the hall for the first time. "Lock the door." She obeyed before thinking. Metal clicked into place. Then came the first gunshot downstairs. Noah flinched violently against her chest. The entire building erupted afterward. Men shouting below. Running footsteps. More gunfire echoing through concrete stairwells. Elena pulled Noah toward the bathroom instinctively, because every terrified parent chose the smallest room in moments like this. The apartment lights flickered once. Then darkness swallowed everything. Noah started breathing too fast. "Mom, it's okay." Her voice trembled despite herself. "Stay low." Another gunshot exploded directly outside in the hallway this time. Then silence. Heavy silence. Elena could hear her own pulse. A shadow moved beneath the apartment door. Noah grabbed her sleeve tightly. Then his voice came from outside. Elena. Calm. Controlled. Him? She unlocked the door immediately. He entered carrying a handgun low against his side. Blood stained one sleeve of the dark coat, but he moved without hesitation. Two other men followed behind him, briefly carrying rifles before disappearing farther down the hall toward the stairwell. They breached the lobby. He said, "We're moving now." "Noah, I've got him." The answer came automatically, protective before discussion even existed. Another burst of gunfire thundered downstairs. The building shook faintly. Noah looked terrified now, small hands trembling openly for the first time since this began. The man crouched in front of him immediately. "Hey." Noah looked up. "You stay close to me and your mother tonight." "Understand," Noah nodded. The man rested one steady hand briefly against the back of the boy's head. Quiet reassurance. Then he stood again instantly, attention already returning toward the hallway. "Elena," he said, "listen carefully. If we separate, you take the west fire stairs to the alley. Black SUV. Driver's name is Mateo. We're not separating." His eyes met hers. The exhaustion she always saw there had disappeared completely tonight. What remained was colder, sharper. A man built for violence moving through it with terrifying familiarity. "You don't get emotional during moments like this," he said quietly. "You survive them." Another crash echoed from downstairs. Closer now. He moved toward the hallway again, then stopped unexpectedly. Without turning around, he spoke quietly enough that only Elena heard it. "Daniel begged me to keep you both away from this world." The words froze her in place. "He came to me 3 nights before he died." The man continued. "He knew people inside the police department were compromised. He knew someone would come after the records eventually." Elena felt suddenly unable to breathe properly. "You could have stopped it," she whispered. A long silence followed. "Then finally I tried. No excuses. No dramatic guilt. Just truth heavy enough to carry by itself." Shouting erupted downstairs again. One of the armed men from the stairwell appeared at the hallway corner. "They're coming up." The man beside Elena chambered another round into the handgun calmly. Then he looked back at her. For the first time since she met him, his composure cracked slightly around the edges. Not weakness. Fear. Not for himself. For the next 10 minutes, he said quietly, "I need you to trust me more than you hate what I am." Then the hallway lights died completely. The next 10 minutes became noise, concrete dust, and survival. Elena barely remembered moving through the hallway afterward. Only fragments stayed clear. The man beside her firing twice toward the stairwell, without hesitation. One of his men dragging a bookshelf across the 4th floor landing to slow whoever was coming up. Noah buried against Elena's shoulder while the building shook from gunfire below. Then suddenly they were moving down the west fire stairs, exactly like he said. Fast, controlled, protected from every angle. The black SUV waited in the alley with the engine running beneath falling snow. One armed driver outside the door. Another vehicle already blocking the street entrance behind them. The man opened the rear passenger door first. "Elena." "Noah." Inside. She grabbed his arm before climbing in. "You're coming too." His eyes shifted briefly toward the apartment building behind them. More lights turning on now. Sirens somewhere closer. I've still got people upstairs. No. Her voice cracked. No more promises. Either you leave with us now, or a burst of gunfire exploded from the fourth-floor windows above. His expression hardened immediately. Elena. Something in the way he said her name made her stop speaking. Not cold. Final, you keep your son alive tonight. He said quietly. That's the only thing I care about. Then he shut the SUV door himself. The vehicle pulled away seconds later. Elena twisted around immediately through the rear window. Snow streaked across the glass while the apartment building disappeared farther behind them. On the sidewalk below the entrance, he already stood surrounded by armed men moving at his command, while police sirens closed in from every direction. Even at a distance, he looked steady, like violence belonged to him more naturally than fear ever could. Noah finally spoke from beside her, in a small, shaking voice. Is he staying there alone? Elena couldn't answer. Because for the first time since meeting him, she understood something clearly. Men like him were built to stand between danger and everyone else, even when it destroyed them. Snow covered the city for 3 straight days after the shooting. The news talked about arrests, corrupt police, missing officials, violence near the docks. Elena stopped listening after the second report because none of it answered the only thing that mattered. Whether he was still alive. The story simply disappeared beneath politics and winter headlines. She and Noah stayed in a furnished apartment across the city with armed security downstairs, pretending not to watch them. Safe building. Warm lights. Doors that actually locked properly. Noah hated it immediately. Noah sat near the window the first night, staring out at the snow. He's not here, he said quietly. Elena looked over from the kitchen table. Who but Noah only pulled the blanket tighter around himself and kept watching the parking lot. A knock sounded at the apartment door before she could respond. Her heart stopped once, then steadied, because somehow she already knew. Elena crossed the apartment slowly and opened the door. He stood there alone. No gun visible tonight. No armed men nearby. Just exhaustion carved deep beneath his eyes and healing bruises fading along his jaw. Snow melted slowly across the shoulders of his dark coat. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Noah ran forward before Elena could stop him. The man caught him automatically, with one arm against his chest. Careful despite the obvious pain in his side when he moved. You got shot, Noah said immediately. A little. That's a stupid answer. A rough, tired laugh escaped him before he could hide it. Elena stared at him carefully. Is it over? His expression settled again. Yes. You're sure? I buried the last man looking for your family yesterday morning. The words should have terrified her. Instead, she only heard certainty. Safety. He gently set Noah back down. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the kitchen counter between them. Daniel's missing phone. Elena stared at it silently. He kept photos of you both on there, the man said quietly. Mostly Noah. Her throat tightened instantly. He talked about you constantly. He continued. You and your son were the only clean thing left in his life near the end. The apartment became very quiet. Snow drifted softly outside the windows. Finally, Elena asked the question that mattered now. Why move across the hall yourself? His eyes lowered briefly. Because I failed him once already. No dramatic apology followed. No excuse. Just a tired, dangerous man standing in warm apartment light, telling the truth as carefully as he knew how. Noah broke the silence first. You fixed our heater. The man looked down at him. And the lock? Noah continued. And you stayed outside our door every night. Another quiet pause. Then Noah asked softly, were you lonely too? Something moved across the man's face then. Small. Human. Gone almost immediately. Yes. Noah stepped forward and wrapped his arms around him without hesitation. The man froze completely, like nobody had touched him gently in a very long time. Elena watched him lower one careful hand onto the back of her son's hoodie, protective by instinct now. Outside, the city kept moving beneath snowfall and distant sirens. Cold streets, dark windows, men still hunting other men somewhere far away from this room. But inside the apartment, Noah finally looked safe enough to yawn, and Elena realized something quietly devastating. For months, she thought danger lived across that old hallway, when the truth was far simpler. For the first time in years, Elena looked at her sleeping son without waiting for something bad to happen next. Because just outside their new door, the man everyone feared was still awake.